The galactic aliens sent their best captain to Earth. He returned, asking for human protection. Far beyond the edge of the solar system, past the light of stars that humans had not yet named, there existed a great alliance of worlds called the Calith Dominion. It was old. It was powerful. It had existed for over 10,000 years, gathering hundreds of star systems under one banner. Its ships were larger than moons. Its cities floated in orbit around dying suns. It had seen empires rise and fall, and it had survived them all. The Dominion was ruled by a council of 12 species, each one chosen for wisdom, strength, or unmatched knowledge. They called themselves the Elders of the Void, though most other species simply called them the Dominion Council. For thousands of years, the Council's biggest task was simple: watch the galaxy, find new life, and decide what to do with it. Sometimes new species were welcomed as friends, sometimes they were left alone, and sometimes, if they were seen as dangerous or unworthy, they were quietly erased before they could grow. It was cold, practical work. Nobody on the Council enjoyed it, but everyone accepted it. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and the Dominion had not survived for 10,000 years by being careless. That was why, one ordinary day in the Council chambers, deep inside a ship the size of a city, alarms rang out from a research station on the far edge of known space. A new signal had been found. It came from a small yellow star, the kind astronomers barely noticed. Around that star spun a handful of planets, most of them useless rock and gas. But the third planet from the star was different. It was blue and green, covered in water, wrapped in a thin layer of air that somehow supported life. And from that planet came something the Dominion had not expected: radio signals. Weapons tests, satellites. Electric light spread across entire continents at night, visible from orbit. The planet was called Earth. The Council studied the signals for months before anyone dared to act. What they found troubled them deeply. This species, calling themselves humans, had only existed as a civilization for a few thousand years, a blink of an eye, compared to the Dominion's history. But in that short time, they had gone from throwing stones to splitting atoms. They had fought wars that killed millions, yet built hospitals that saved millions more. They sent messages of peace into space on golden records, while at the same time building weapons that could end their own world many times over. "They are contradictions," said Elder Thassil, the oldest member of the Council, a being made of crystal and light who had watched 1,000 species be born and die. "They love and they hate in the same breath. They destroy and they heal with the same hands. I have never seen anything like it." "That is exactly why they frighten me," said another council member, a insect-like elder named Korash, whose people valued order above all else. A species without balance cannot be trusted. If they grow strong before they grow wise, they could become a danger to every world around them. The council argued for weeks. Some wanted to destroy the human threat while it was still small, before humans could reach the stars themselves. Others wanted to leave Earth alone completely, hoping the humans would either destroy themselves or grow past their savagery without any interference. But the majority agreed on one thing: before any decision could be made, someone needed to go to Earth and see the truth with their own eyes. Reports and signals could only tell so much. The council needed a witness. They needed their best. That was how Captain Ron Voss received his orders. Voss was not a young officer. He had served the Dominion fleet for over 200 years, which for his species, the tall, gray-skinned Velkari, was still only middle age. He had commanded starships through 3 border wars, survived 2 assassination attempts by rival factions, and negotiated peace treaties that ended conflicts older than most planets' recorded history. He was known across a dozen star systems as a captain who never lost a crew member if he could help it, and never broke a promise once he gave it. He was also known, quietly, as a captain who did not enjoy the Council's darker decisions. More than once, he had been the one sent to observe a new species, only to argue against destroying them when the Council leaned toward violence. He had saved 3 young civilizations from being wiped out simply because he told the Council, plainly and without fear, that they did not deserve to die for the crime of being different. This was exactly why the Council chose him for Earth. "We need someone who will tell us the truth," Elder Thassil said to him during a private meeting inside the flagship Voice of Ages. "Not what we want to hear. not what makes the decision easier. The truth, Captain Voss, however uncomfortable it may be. And if the truth is that they must be destroyed, Voss asked. He always asked this question. It was not a challenge to the council. It was simply how he worked. He never assumed the answer before he saw the evidence. Then you will tell us that too, Thassil answered. But I suspect, Captain, that this species will surprise you. They have already surprised us. Voss was given a single ship, small and fast, built to avoid detection by any technology the humans might possess. It was called the Silent Wind, and it carried only a skeleton crew, a pilot, a science officer, and Voss himself. Their mission was simple in words but difficult in truth. Travel to Earth. Observe the species called humans without being seen. Learn everything possible about their strength, their weaknesses, their way of thinking. Then return and give an honest report to the council. Before he left, Voss was given one more piece of information, one that the council kept from most of the fleet, and one that changed the entire mission in his mind. The Devourer swarm was moving again. Voss had heard rumors of the swarm his entire career, the way soldiers hear old ghost stories passed down through generations. The swarm was not a species in the normal sense. It was closer to a plague, a mass of ships and machines and half-organic horrors that consumed entire star systems, stripping them of resources and life, then moving on to the next. No one knew where it came from. No one had ever negotiated with it, because it did not seem to want anything except growth. 3 great civilizations, older even than the Dominion, had vanished into the swarm's path over the centuries, leaving behind only cold, empty systems and broken monuments. For the last 1,000 years, the swarm had been quiet, its location unknown, its activity minimal. The Dominion had almost allowed itself to believe the threat had ended. Now, new reports said it was stirring again on the far edge of charted space, moving slowly, but steadily in a direction that, if it did not change course, would eventually bring it toward both Dominion territory and the quiet, unprotected region of space, where Earth's little yellow star sat completely alone. This is why Earth matters now more than ever, the seal told Voss privately, her crystal form dimming slightly, a sign among her kind of deep worry. If the humans are as strong as their signals suggest, they may become allies against the swarm, when the day comes that we can no longer stand alone. If they are as dangerous as some fear, they may become a second front we cannot survive fighting while the swarm approaches. Either way, Captain, we must know the truth before that day arrives. Voss accepted the mission without hesitation, though the weight of it settled heavily on his shoulders as the Silent Wind left Dominion space and began the long journey toward the unremarkable yellow star that humans called the Sun. During the journey, which took several months even at the ship's considerable speed, Voss studied everything the Dominion had gathered about Earth. He watched human television broadcasts, translated slowly by his science officer, and quiet, careful being named Iath. He listened to human music, strange and varied beyond anything he had heard from a single species before. Rhythms of anger, joy, sorrow, and hope, sometimes all within the same song. He read translated fragments of human history, and found himself disturbed by the wars, the empires, that rose on the suffering of others, the slow and painful march toward what humans called progress. But he also found himself moved, in ways he did not expect, by other fragments. Stories of strangers risking their lives for people they had never met. Doctors who traveled across the world to help the sick, in places that offered them nothing in return. Ordinary people who gave everything they had to protect children who were not even their own. "They are the strangest species I have ever studied," Iath said one evening, as the two of them reviewed a broadcast of humans responding to an earthquake on the other side of their world, sending aid across oceans to people they had never met and would likely never meet. Strange, Voss agreed, watching the images of rescue workers digging through rubble by hand, exhausted, bleeding, refusing to stop. But perhaps not as dangerous as the Council fears, or perhaps far more dangerous. I am not yet certain which. Does it matter which, Captain? Our orders are the same either way. Observe, report. Let the Council decide. Voss did not answer immediately. He was watching a rescue worker on the screen, a young human woman, covered in dust, carrying a child from the wreckage of a collapsed building. The woman was crying, though whether from grief or relief, Voss could not tell. She held the child close, whispering words the translation could not fully capture. Something about safety. Something about being loved. "No," Voss finally said. "It does not matter which. Our orders are the same. But I find myself hoping, Iyeth, more than I have hoped for any mission before, that the truth we find is one the Council will be glad to hear." The silent wind continued on through the dark, carrying its small crew closer to the strange blue planet, and the species that would soon change everything the Dominion believed about the galaxy, about strength, about survival, and about what it truly meant to be worthy of protection. Behind them, far across the stars, the Devourer swarm continued its slow, patient march forward, indifferent to empires, indifferent to species, indifferent to anything except the endless hunger that drove it onward. Ahead of them, Earth turned quietly in its orbit, its people entirely unaware that they were being watched, judged, and measured against a standard they did not know existed. A standard that would soon determine whether their small blue world would be left alone, destroyed, or asked to stand as a shield between the galaxy and something far worse than any war humanity had ever fought. Captain Ron Voss leaned back in his chair as the ship's systems marked their approach to the outer edge of the solar system, and for the first time in 200 years of service, he found himself uncertain of what he truly wanted his report to say. The silent wind slipped into Earth's solar system without a single human instrument detecting it. Its hull bent light around itself, and its engines ran quieter than a whisper. Captain Ron Voss watched from the bridge as the blue planet grew larger on the view screen, its surface wrapped in white clouds, its oceans catching the light of the small yellow sun. "No weapons platforms detected in orbit," Iyeth reported, scanning quietly from her station. "A handful of satellites, nothing that could threaten a ship of our class." "That is not surprising," Voss said. "The Council's reports already told us their space technology is young. It is not their ships that concern the Council, Iyeth. It is what is inside their heads." He ordered the silent wind into a high, hidden orbit, far enough away to avoid any chance of detection, close enough to gather detailed information. For the first few days, the crew simply watched. They listened to broadcasts from every corner of the planet, in hundreds of different languages, learning as much as they could before deciding on a next step. What Voss saw confused him more with each passing day. He watched human news channels report on wars in one part of the world, showing images of destroyed buildings and grieving families. In the very same broadcast, only minutes later, he watched footage of scientists working together across different nations, sharing research freely, trying to cure diseases that did not care what language a person spoke or what flag they lived under. He watched footage of human children laughing in a park, chasing a ball, completely unaware of the weight of the world around them. He watched footage of soldiers on a battlefield, exhausted and afraid, following orders they clearly did not want to follow, but following them anyway out of loyalty to the people beside them. "I do not understand them," Voss admitted one night, standing alone on the bridge, watching the blue planet turn slowly below. "They fight each other constantly, over land, over beliefs, over things that seem, from where we stand, so small. And yet, when disaster strikes, when one part of their world suffers, the rest of them often rush to help, even strangers, who share nothing with them but the same species." "Perhaps that is exactly the point, Captain," Iyeth offered. "Perhaps it is not one thing or the other. Perhaps humans simply are both at once, always, and that is what makes them impossible to predict." Voss considered this for a long moment. The Council will not accept impossible to predict as an answer. They will demand a conclusion. Dangerous or not dangerous. Worthy or not worthy. Then perhaps you will have to give them a conclusion they do not expect. After 2 weeks of quiet observation from orbit, Voss made a decision that went beyond his original orders. He wanted to see humans up close, not just through screens and signals, but face to face. He needed to know how they behaved when they did not know they were being watched by something far beyond their own world. He chose a location carefully, a quiet mountain region, far from major cities, where a small group of human researchers operated a remote scientific station. The station studied weather patterns and wildlife, and it was staffed by only a handful of humans, isolated enough that Voss believed he could observe them, and perhaps even approach them, without causing wider panic across the planet. Using technology far beyond anything Earth possessed, Voss altered his own appearance to pass, at a distance and in poor light, as something close enough to human to avoid immediate alarm. He was still noticeably strange up close. His skin held a faint gray tone, his eyes were larger than human eyes, and he stood taller than most people on Earth. But from a distance, wrapped in a long coat and hood, he could walk among them without instantly causing panic. He left Iath aboard the Silent Wind, with strict orders to intervene only if his life was in immediate danger, and beamed down under cover of a heavy mountain storm. The station was small, made of metal and wood, built to survive harsh winters. Voss approached slowly, watching from the tree line as 3 humans moved about outside, securing equipment against the coming storm. One of them, an older man with gray hair and a thick coat, was shouting instructions to the other 2, a younger man and a woman, both of whom moved quickly despite the freezing wind and rain. Voss watched them work together, with an efficiency that impressed him. There was no wasted movement, no confusion. Each of them seemed to know exactly what needed to be done, and they trusted each other enough to simply do their part without constant supervision. Then, without warning, the wind shifted violently, and a section of loose equipment came free, crashing toward the younger man before he could react. The woman moved first. She threw herself forward, pushing the man out of the path of the falling equipment, taking the impact against her own shoulder instead. She cried out in pain, falling hard onto the wet ground. Voss's instincts, honed by 200 years of combat and command, told him to stay hidden. His orders told him to observe only. But something else, something he could not fully explain even to himself, moved his feet forward, before he had fully decided to act. He reached the woman just as the older man and the younger one reached her from the other side. All 3 of them froze for a moment, staring at the tall, strange figure that had appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the middle of a storm. "Who are you?" the older man demanded, stepping in front of the woman protectively, despite being smaller and clearly less physically capable than the stranger in front of him. Voss considered his options. He could retreat now, disappear into the storm, and likely avoid discovery entirely. It would be the safest choice, the choice his orders technically supported, but he found himself unable to simply turn away from an injured person, while doing nothing to help. "I am someone who can help her," Voss said instead, his translator device rendering his words into clear, accented English. "Her shoulder is injured, but not broken. If you allow me, I can ease her pain." The younger man, still recovering from his own shock at nearly being crushed, looked between Voss and the woman on the ground. "How do you know that? Are you a doctor? Where did you even come from?" "There is no time for a full explanation," Voss said, kneeling carefully beside the injured woman, who watched him with wide, frightened, but curious eyes. "Please, trust me for only a moment." To his surprise, it was the woman herself who spoke next, her voice tight with pain but steady. "Let him help, Marcus. Whatever he is, he's not attacking us. He came out of a storm to help a stranger. That has to count for something." Voss was startled by her words, though he did not show it outwardly. Even injured, even facing an unknown and clearly non-human figure, she was choosing to extend trust rather than fear. It was a small moment, but it struck him deeply. He worked quickly, using a small medical device hidden in his coat to numb the pain in her shoulder and stabilize the injury enough that she could be moved safely indoors. The 2 men watched him closely the entire time, tense and ready to react if he showed any sign of hostile intent, but he offered none. Once the woman was resting inside the station, wrapped in blankets with her shoulder properly supported, the older man, who introduced himself as Professor Daniel Hale, finally asked the question Voss had been waiting for. "What are you? And don't tell me you're just a very tall man in a hood. I've lived long enough to know when something isn't right." Voss considered lying. It would have been easy, and perhaps safer for his mission. But looking at these 3 humans, who had just welcomed a complete stranger into their home despite every reason to be afraid, he found he did not want to lie to them. "My name is Ron Voss," he said simply. "I am not from your world. I have come to observe your species, quietly, from a place far beyond anything your instruments can detect. I did not intend to reveal myself, but I could not stand by and do nothing while someone was injured in front of me." The silence that followed stretched long and heavy. The younger man, Marcus, looked as though he wanted to run. The woman, whose name Voss had learned was Elena, simply stared at him with an expression that mixed fear and fascination in equal measure. Professor Hale, however, simply nodded slowly, as though confirming something he had already suspected. "I always thought it was strange," Hale said quietly, "that a species as young as ours would be alone in a universe this big. I suppose I was right to wonder." He looked directly at Voss. "Why are you really here?" Voss hesitated only a moment before answering honestly. "My people are deciding what to do about yours," he said. "Whether you are a danger to be stopped, or something worth protecting. I was sent to find the truth, and bring it back to those who will make that decision." Elena, despite her pain, let out a short, tired laugh. "So you're here to decide if humanity lives or dies, and the first thing you did was stop to help a stranger with a hurt shoulder, instead of just watching from the shadows." Voss considered her words carefully. "Yes," he admitted, "I suppose I did." "Then maybe," Elena said, wincing as she shifted slightly to look at him more directly, "you already have your answer, and you just don't want to admit it yet." Voss did not respond immediately. Outside, the storm continued to rage against the walls of the small station, and inside, 3 humans and 1 alien captain sat together in a silence that felt, for the first time since Voss had arrived at this strange blue world, less like an observation, and more like the beginning of something neither side fully understood yet. Captain Ron Voss stayed at the mountain station for 3 more days, longer than his orders allowed, longer than caution advised. He told himself it was necessary, that he needed more direct information than distant observation could provide. But in truth, something about the 3 humans he had met had pulled at him in a way he did not fully understand. Professor Hale asked careful, thoughtful questions about Voss's people, about the Dominion, about the wider galaxy that humans had only ever imagined in stories. Marcus remained cautious, watching Voss closely, clearly still uncertain whether trusting an alien stranger was wise. Elena, recovering slowly from her injury, spoke to Voss, the most freely of the 3, curious about everything, unafraid to challenge his assumptions about her own species. "You keep asking about our wars," she said to him on the second night, as the storm outside finally began to calm. "But you never ask about the rest of it, the art, the music, the way people show up for each other when it matters most." "The Council does not care about art," Voss admitted. "They care about whether your species is dangerous." "Then maybe the Council is asking the wrong question," Elena replied simply. Voss found himself thinking about her words long after their conversation ended. On the 4th day, Iath's voice came through Voss's communicator, tense and urgent. "Captain, you need to return to the ship immediately. Something has happened." Voss said a quick, careful farewell to the 3 humans, promising Professor Hale that he would try to return one day, though he could not say when or if that promise would ever be kept. Then he beamed back aboard the Silent Wind, where Iath was waiting with troubling news. "A ship entered the system 2 hours ago," she reported. "Not one of ours. Scans identify it as belonging to the Threxil Combine." Voss's expression darkened immediately. The Threxil Combine was a rival faction within the wider galactic community, one that had long argued for a much more aggressive approach toward new species. Where the Dominion Council debated and deliberated, the Threxil Combine preferred to test new species directly, often through methods that bordered on outright hostility, disguised as simple assessments of capability. "What are they doing?" Voss asked, already moving toward the command chair. "They have entered low orbit above a coastal city," Iath said. "Population approximately 11 million. I believe they intend to test human military response directly." "They intend to attack," Voss said grimly. It was not a question. Iath nodded slowly. "Scans show weapon systems powering on the Threxil vessel. If I had to guess their intention, Captain, I would say they plan a controlled strike, enough to provoke a response without risking full destruction of the city. A test of strength, nothing more, in their eyes. And if the humans respond poorly, or not at all, what will the Threxil report to their own council? That humanity is weak and safe to exploit, or conquer, if it suits them." Voss felt something cold settle in his chest, an anger he had not expected to feel this strongly. "Get us into position. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. I want to see how this unfolds before we act." The Silent Wind moved quickly and quietly into a closer orbit, hidden from both human and Threxil sensors, giving Voss and Iath a clear view of the events about to unfold above the unsuspecting coastal city. The Threxil ship dropped its cloak just long enough to launch a single, powerful energy weapon toward the outskirts of the city, aimed carefully to destroy infrastructure and cause visible damage without an immediate, overwhelming loss of life. It was, in the language of the Threxil Combine, simply a demonstration. To the humans below, it was the beginning of what looked like the end of the world. Voss watched as the strike hit a power station on the edge of the city, sending a massive explosion into the sky, visible for miles. Within minutes, human military channels across the globe were flooded with emergency communications. Fighter jets scrambled from nearby bases. Ground forces mobilized. Civilian evacuation orders went out across every available channel. "They are afraid," Ioth observed, watching the chaotic but rapid human response. "But Captain, look at how quickly they organized despite that fear." Voss watched, fascinated despite the gravity of the situation, as human military commanders coordinated a response in minutes that would have taken many other species hours or days to organize. Emergency services rushed toward the strike zone even as reports of further danger remained unclear. Ordinary civilians, filmed on personal devices even as they fled, stopped to help strangers, carrying the injured, guiding the confused, refusing to leave anyone behind, despite the danger to themselves. Above the city, the Threxil ship remained in position, clearly expecting confusion, panic, and disorganized retaliation, the kind they had seen from 100 other young species during similar assessments. Instead, human jets arrived within 20 minutes, faster than the Threxil's own data suggested was possible. They opened fire on the alien vessel, with weapons the Threxil had judged, based on old and incomplete data, to be far too primitive to cause meaningful damage. They were wrong. Human weapons technology, it turned out, had advanced considerably faster than outside observers had assumed, driven by decades of continuous, aggressive military competition between human nations. The Threxil ship's shields, designed to withstand attacks from species the Combine considered comparable threats, buckled under a combined assault from multiple aircraft, each pilot flying with a precision and aggression that stunned even Voss, a veteran of countless battles across 200 years of service. "They are not retreating," Ioth said, watching the human pilots continue their assault, even as the Threxil vessel began to power its own weapons in retaliation. "Captain, they must know the danger they are facing, and still, they press the attack." Voss said nothing, simply watching as the humans below fought with a ferocity that had nothing to do with numbers or technology, and everything to do with a refusal to back down from a threat to their home, no matter how impossible the odds appeared. The Threxil ship, damaged and clearly unprepared for this level of resistance, made the decision to retreat rather than risk further losses in what was supposed to be a simple, low-risk test. It vanished back into the depths of space, leaving behind a damaged power station, a frightened but resilient city, and a species that had just proven, in the span of less than an hour, that it was far more capable than any outside observer had believed. Voss sat in silence for a long moment after the Threxil ship disappeared from sensors. "Captain," Ioth said carefully, "this changes the situation considerably. The Threxil will report this encounter to their own leadership. Word will spread. Other factions may grow curious or concerned about a species capable of driving off an assessment vessel with what they would consider primitive technology." "Yes," Voss agreed quietly. "It changes everything." He thought of Elena's words from just days before. Maybe you already have your answer, and you just don't want to admit it yet. He thought of the rescue workers he had watched digging through rubble with their bare hands. He thought of the pilots who had just risked their lives, without hesitation, to defend a city full of strangers. He thought of the strange, contradictory, endlessly complicated species that fought each other bitterly over small differences, yet somehow found the unity to stand together completely when faced with a true, external threat. "Ioth," he said finally, "prepare a full report of everything we have witnessed. Every observation, every data point, every contradiction. I want nothing left out. Not the wars, not the cruelty, not the compassion, not the courage. The Council needs to see all of it, exactly as it is. And your own recommendation, Captain? What will you tell them?" Voss was quiet for a long moment, watching the blue planet turn peacefully below them once more. its people already beginning the long, difficult work of recovering from an attack they did not start and did not fully understand. "I will tell them the truth," he said finally, "that this is not a species we should fear, and not a species we should ignore. This is a species we should stand beside, before the day comes when we desperately need someone willing to fight beside us, without hesitation." He turned the ship back toward the edge of the solar system, beginning the long journey home, carrying with him not just data and reports, but a conviction that would soon challenge everything the Dominion Council believed about power, worth, and survival, in a galaxy that was growing more dangerous with every passing day. Behind them, far beyond the edge of charted space, the Devourer swarm continued its slow, patient advance, drawing closer to a future where the difference between survival and extinction might depend entirely on the choice the Dominion was about to make. The journey back to Dominion space felt longer than the journey out, though the distance was the same. Captain Ron Voss spent much of it in silence, reviewing the data Iyeth had gathered, watching recordings of the Threxel attack again and again, studying the human response with the careful eye of a man preparing to defend a decision he knew would not be welcomed easily. He also thought often of Professor Hale, of Marcus, and of Elena. He thought of the strange mixture of fear and trust in their eyes when they first saw him, and how quickly that fear had softened into something closer to curiosity, and eventually, something close to friendship. He thought of Elena's words, spoken so simply, yet carrying more weight than she likely realized. "Maybe you already have your answer." By the time the silent wind reached the outer edges of Dominion territory, Voss had made his decision. The only question remaining was whether the council would accept it. He was summoned to the council chambers within hours of his arrival, standing once more before the 12 elders inside the great ship Voice of Ages. Elder Thassel sat at the center of the gathering, her crystal form glowing softly, patient as always, though Voss could sense the tension in the room even before anyone spoke. "Captain Voss," Thassel said, "you have been gone longer than your original orders specified. We trust this means you have gathered information worth the delay." "I have, Elder," Voss said, "and I ask that the council listen to all of it before reaching any conclusions." He spoke for nearly 2 hours, longer than any report he had given in his entire career. He described the wars humans fought among themselves, holding nothing back, including the darkest chapters of human history that the council had already glimpsed through old broadcasts and records. He described the destructive power of human weapons and the speed at which their technology continued to advance. He did not soften these details, knowing that any attempt to hide them would only weaken his credibility later. But he also described the rescue workers who dug through rubble with bare, bleeding hands to save strangers. He described the scientists who shared their research freely across every division and border, working together despite their differences to find cures for diseases that threatened all of humanity equally. He described Professor Hale, Marcus, and Elena, 3 ordinary humans who had welcomed a strange and clearly non-human visitor into their home during a storm, choosing trust over fear, even when fear would have been the safer, more reasonable choice. Finally, he described the Threxel attack, moment by moment, watching several council members grow visibly uneasy as he explained how a rival faction had attempted to test humanity through direct violence, and how humanity had responded, not with panic or surrender, but with a fierce, coordinated defense that had driven off a ship many times more advanced than their own technology should have allowed them to challenge. When he finished, the chamber remained silent for a long moment. "You paint a picture of contradiction, Captain," said Elder Korash finally, his insect-like mandibles clicking softly as he spoke. "A species capable of both great cruelty and great kindness, capable of destroying its own cities in war, yet risking everything to save strangers from disaster. How are we meant to judge such a species? By its worst moments, or its best?" "You are meant to judge them," Voss said firmly, "the same way you would judge any of us, Elder. None of the species within this council are without contradiction. We have all fought wars. We have all made mistakes we are not proud of. The difference is simply that humanity is young enough that their contradictions are still visible, still raw, still unresolved. Given time, I believe they could become something remarkable. I believe, in fact, they already are." "And what would you have this council do with this belief, Captain?" Thassel asked quietly. "Speak plainly. We have not called you here for poetry." Voss took a slow breath before answering, This was the moment he had been preparing for. Recommend against invasion. I recommend against invasion, he said. I recommend against interference of any kind meant to control or contain them. But I go further than simply recommending we leave them alone. He paused, meeting the eyes of every council member present. I recommend the Dominion extend a hand of alliance to Earth, not conquest, not observation from the shadows. An honest, open alliance, offered freely, without demands. The chamber erupted into murmurs of surprise and disbelief. No captain in Dominion history had ever returned from an assessment mission recommending a full alliance with a species this young, this unstable, this dangerous, by every traditional measure the Council used to judge new civilizations. An alliance, Korash repeated, his tone sharp with disbelief. Captain Voss, you ask us to extend the full trust of the Dominion to a species barely out of its own infancy, a species that still fights wars over borders and beliefs, simply because they showed compassion to you personally, and courage against a single attack? I ask you to extend trust, Voss said, because I believe, with everything I have witnessed, that this is a species capable of standing beside us, when the time comes, that we can no longer stand alone. He let the words hang in the air for a moment, before continuing. The Devourer swarm is moving again, he said. You all know this, I know this. It is only a matter of time before it reaches either our territory, or theirs, or both. When that day comes, Elder Thassel, do you truly believe the Dominion alone will be enough to stop it? We have faced the swarm before. We have lost against the swarm before. Perhaps it is time we consider that survival may require more than the strength we already possess. The chamber fell into a heavier silence this time, one thick with the memory of old defeats, old losses, entire systems consumed by an enemy that none of them fully understood, even after 1,000 years of studying its rare and terrifying advances. You believe humanity could help us against the swarm, Thassel said slowly, more a statement than a question. I believe, Voss said, that a species capable of the courage, resilience, and unity I witnessed above that coastal city, facing an enemy they did not choose and could not fully understand, is exactly the kind of ally we will need when the swarm finally arrives at our door. I am not asking the Council to trust humanity blindly. I am asking the Council to give them the same chance every other species in this Dominion was once given, the chance to prove themselves as partners, not conquests. The debate that followed lasted for 3 full days. Some council members, led firmly by Korash, argued that extending an alliance to such an unpredictable species was reckless, that humanity's capacity for both great compassion and great violence made them too dangerous a partner to risk trusting fully. Others argued that Voss's report, more thorough and more honest than any previous assessment in Dominion history, deserved to be taken seriously, precisely because Voss himself had never once given the Council a false or convenient report in over 200 years of service. Elder Thassel remained quiet through much of the debate, listening carefully to every argument, weighing the fear of the unknown against the growing dread of the swarm's slow, patient advance. On the 3rd day, she finally spoke. We have faced this exact choice before, she said quietly. Many times, across many species, across many centuries. Sometimes we chose fear, and we destroyed civilizations that might have become great allies, simply because they frightened us in their early years. Sometimes we chose trust, and we were rewarded with partnerships that carried this Dominion through its darkest hours. She turned to look directly at Voss. Captain, you have given us the most complete, most honest report I have witnessed in my long life on this council. I trust your judgment, as I have trusted it many times before. I move that we approach humanity, cautiously, but honestly, with an offer of alliance. The vote that followed was close, closer than any vote Voss had witnessed in his career, but in the end, by the narrowest of margins, the Council agreed. The Dominion would make contact with Earth, not through hidden ships or careful, distant observation, openly, honestly. As one civilization reaching out to another, offering partnership rather than conquest, protection rather than domination, in the hope that humanity, given the truth of the threat approaching them all, would choose to stand beside the Dominion rather than against it. Voss left the council chambers that night carrying a weight he had not expected. He had won the argument he had traveled across the galaxy to make, but now came the harder task, the one that would determine whether his faith in humanity had been justified, or whether he had gambled the future of two civilizations on the strength of a single storm-soaked conversation with three strangers on a quiet mountain, and a single, fierce battle above a coastal city that could have gone very differently. Somewhere far beyond the edge of both human and Dominion space, the Devourer swarm continued its slow, silent advance, indifferent to the decisions being made in its path, indifferent to the fragile hope now beginning to form between two very different worlds who would soon have to decide, together, whether they could face what was coming. 3 months after the Dominion Council made its decision, a single ship broke through Earth's atmosphere in broad daylight, over the same coastal city that had once been attacked by the Threxil Combine. This time, there was no weapon fire, no explosion, no panic. The ship simply descended slowly, openly, its lights dimmed in what Dominion diplomats had carefully studied as a universal sign of peaceful intent among most known species. Captain Ron Voss stood at the front of the small diplomatic party that stepped off the ship, flanked by Elder Thassel herself, who had insisted on being present for this first true meeting between their two civilizations. Ieth stood close behind them, along with a handful of Dominion scientists and translators. Human military forces surrounded the landing site within minutes, weapons raised, helicopters circling overhead. It was, Voss knew, exactly the response he had expected, and exactly the response he had warned the Council to prepare for. "Do not raise your weapons," Voss said calmly, his translator broadcasting his words clearly across every open military channel nearby, a technique the Dominion had prepared carefully in advance. "We have not come to attack. We have come to speak, honestly and openly, with the leaders of your world." The tension in the air remained thick as human command structures scrambled to respond to an event no protocol had ever truly prepared them for. But slowly, cautiously, the situation began to shift from confrontation toward communication. World leaders were contacted, emergency councils convened, and within a day, a small group of human representatives, gathered hastily from several of Earth's most powerful nations, arrived to meet with the Dominion delegation. Among them, to Voss's quiet surprise and satisfaction, was Professor Daniel Hale, whose research station had been quietly monitored and questioned by human authorities in the months since Voss's first secret visit. Hale had been brought in specifically because of his first-hand account of meeting an alien visitor peacefully, an account that had, in the end, proven crucial in convincing at least some human leaders that this new arrival might not be an immediate threat. "Captain Voss," Hale said, stepping forward with a small, tired smile despite the tension surrounding them. "I did say you might return one day. I did not expect it to be quite this dramatic." "Some circumstances," Voss replied, "leave little room for quiet visits." The negotiations that followed were long, difficult, and filled with the kind of deep suspicion any species might reasonably feel toward a vastly more advanced civilization suddenly appearing in their skies. Human leaders demanded proof of the Dominion's peaceful intentions. They demanded explanations for why humanity had been watched secretly for months before this open contact. They demanded to know exactly what the Dominion wanted in return for the alliance being offered. Voss and Thassel answered every question honestly, holding nothing back, exactly as Voss had promised the Council he would do. They spoke of the Devourer swarm, the ancient, terrible threat that had already destroyed civilizations far older and more advanced than either humanity or the Dominion. They spoke of its slow, patient advance, and the growing likelihood that it would eventually threaten both human and Dominion space alike. "We are not here to conquer you," Thassel said during one tense session, her crystal form glowing steadily, despite the hostile questions surrounding her. "We are here because Captain Voss convinced our council that your species possesses something rare and valuable, something we may desperately need in the difficult years ahead. Courage, unity in the face of true danger, a willingness to stand and fight for each other, even against impossible odds." "And if we refuse this alliance?" one human representative asked sharply. "What happens then?" "Then you will be left alone," Voss answered honestly. "The Dominion does not force alliances upon unwilling partners, but I will not pretend the road ahead will be easy for either of our civilizations without each other's support when the swarm finally arrives." The negotiations stretched on for weeks, slowly, carefully, Trust began to form, built not on grand promises, but on small, honest moments, much like the one that had first brought Voss and Hale together on a storm-soaked mountain months before. The Dominion shared limited but meaningful technology to help humanity strengthen its defenses. Human scientists, in turn, shared their own remarkable advances in fields the Dominion had never fully explored, surprising even the most experienced Dominion researchers with the creativity and speed of human innovation. Elena, recovered fully from her injury, became one of the first human liaisons assigned to work directly with the Dominion delegation, her earlier encounter with Voss giving her a unique perspective that proved valuable throughout the difficult early negotiations. Marcus, still cautious by nature, eventually became one of the strongest advocates for the alliance, once he saw firsthand the genuine effort the Dominion made to build trust rather than dominance. 6 months after the alliance was formally signed, word reached both human and Dominion command centers simultaneously. The Devourer swarm had changed its course. It was no longer simply advancing in a general direction. It was moving directly toward the border region, where human and Dominion space now met, drawn, some scientists theorized, by the sudden increase in activity and communication between the two civilizations, a beacon of energy and resources too great for the swarm's endless hunger to ignore. The following months were filled with urgent preparation. Dominion and human engineers worked side by side, combining technologies neither civilization could have developed alone. Human ingenuity, sharpened by centuries of conflict and necessity, found creative solutions to problems Dominion scientists had struggled with for generations. Dominion knowledge, refined over 10,000 years of interstellar history, gave humanity access to defenses far beyond anything they could have built alone in the time remaining. When the swarm finally arrived at the border, it was met not by two separate uncertain civilizations, but by a combined fleet. Human ships, flying alongside Dominion vessels. Human soldiers, standing shoulder to shoulder with Dominion warriors. All of them prepared to defend not just their own worlds, but each other's as well. The battle that followed was the largest and most difficult either civilization had ever fought. The swarm's endless numbers pressed against the combined fleet relentlessly, testing every weakness, exploiting every hesitation. There were losses on both sides, painful losses that would be remembered and mourned for generations to come. But for the first time in recorded history, the swarm did not simply overwhelm its opposition and move on unchallenged. It was pushed back, forced to retreat further than it had in 1,000 years, driven away by a combined defense built on trust between two very different species who had chosen, against all traditional caution, to stand together rather than apart. In the aftermath of that first great battle, Captain Ron Voss stood once again on the same mountain where he had first revealed himself to 3 ordinary humans during a quiet storm. Professor Hale, older now, his hair fully gray, stood beside him, along with Elena and Marcus, both changed considerably by the months of shared struggle and shared victory. "You once told me," Elena said quietly, looking out over the peaceful mountain valley below, "that I might already know the answer to your mission, before you were ready to admit it yourself." "You were right," Voss admitted. "I simply needed the courage to trust what I already believed." "And now?" Hale asked. "Now that the Alliance has faced its first true test, and survived it, what do you believe now?" Voss considered the question carefully, watching the sunlight break gently through the clouds over the quiet valley, a small, peaceful moment, stolen from a galaxy that remained, in many ways, still deeply dangerous. "I believe," he said finally, "that the galaxy is full of species who are strong, and species who are wise, and species who are kind, but rarely all 3 at once, and never without contradiction. Humanity carries all 3, tangled together in ways I still do not fully understand, and I believe, more than ever, that this is exactly what makes you the allies we needed, not despite your contradictions, but because of them." Far above them, in the quiet darkness of space, human and Dominion ships continued their joint patrols along the border, watching together for any sign of the swarm's return, prepared, for the first time in either civilization's history, to face whatever threat the future might bring, not alone, but together. And somewhere in the vast unknown reaches of the galaxy, other species, other civilizations, watched this new and unlikely alliance with cautious curiosity, wondering whether the strange, contradictory, endlessly complicated species called humanity truly was as remarkable as the growing legends now suggested, or whether the greatest test of that alliance still waited somewhere ahead, in a future none of them could yet fully see. For now, at least, humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and for Captain Ron Voss, who had once been sent simply to observe and judge a strange new species, that alone felt like the greatest victory of his long and storied career.